Really should have worn a flak jacket if I was going to cover this one. Okay, so I have talked about Doctor Who Series 11 in a variety of ways. Up to this point, I have done episode by episode reviews. I did a general overview of the series as a whole once the last episode had aired. And under extreme duress, I even talked about the ratings that one time, just to stop all you people from asking. Which in hindsight was probably a bad precedent to set. Crap. Also, I had initially planned to get fancier with the editing on this video, include clips, things like that, but seeing how I'm still battling with the BBC over the last video I tried to do that on, I am gonna hold off on that when it comes to Doctor Who for the time being. Anyways, because my overview review of Series 11 was unscripted, I did my usual thing, just kind of touching on everything, not really diving much into the specifics. I also was in that video pointing out both the positives and the negatives because I felt there was plenty of both to talk about. I still feel that way for the record, but I ended up getting a certain amount of deja vu between Series 11 and my feelings on Star Wars The Last Jedi, which is to say, I see a lot of problems with the thing, but they're not the problems that other people seem to be talking about, or at least they aren't the ones that are being shouted about the loudest. So, what this is going to be is mostly just me laying out precisely what I think the problems with Series 11 actually were. And also to clear up some things that I think very much were not the problems. So, Series 11, while not without merit and even a few standout episodes, is one of the most uneven series that New Who has given us. I put it in kind of a cluster of iffy series along with the likes of Series 2, 7, and 8. And while all four of these do share the quality of being a mixed bag with a minority of high points, the specific failings of Series 11, they feel a bit different from the others. The first and foremost difference being that I can look at Series 2, 7, and 8 and say that the show was trying something substantively different in each instance. Series 2 brought a different doctor-companion dynamic, without actually swapping the companion for somebody new. Series 7, it tried for a mid-series split and no two-parters. Series 8 removed the split, kept the no two-parters, and went with a less immediately likable doctor, which was also new for this show, or at least the revival. Series 11... Okay, well, there's the three companion thing, but other than that, it felt like the series was taking things away rather than adding anything new. When I say it feels like things were just being taken away, I'm going to give some examples of what I'm talking about here, because otherwise it just sounds like I'm making stuff up. Series 11 tried again for the no two-parter format, despite the fact that the two series that did that previously were some of the weaker ones to date. But they decided to do it anyway. It ditched the mystery box overarching narrative. In fact, it didn't really have an overarching narrative at all. It featured no returning villains. Because I'm talking about the series proper here, I'm not counting the New Year special. And most prominently, it shaved down the episode count. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with any of these changes. Heck, I've said before, I'm beyond sick of the mystery box style series arcs. But as a general rule, I think if you're going to remove that much, it's probably a good idea to replace it with something. And Series 11 doesn't really feel like it did that. I think the fewer episodes exemplifies what I'm saying here probably the cleanest. I I remember when that got announced, there was a very mixed reaction to that initial announcement of 10 episodes per series, as opposed to the 12 that Capaldi had gotten per series, or the 13 episodes per series that were granted to Smith, Tennant, and Eccleston. Now, when that was initially announced, some people just flat out saw it as a bad omen, others thought it could be a good thing, but most folks, at least from where I sat, seemed to agree that it would be an acceptable trade if it meant each episode was stronger as a result. And that's the thing. This series wasn't different enough from what Doctor Who was already doing that the loss of 2 episodes feels like it was an aid of anything. It just feels like less. It also puts more pressure on each episode. I've actually talked about this before. I even dedicated a video on it a while back. That one was in the context of female superheroes, link up there, all that. But the fewer instances there are of something, the more pressure that is put on each of those instances. If you only give us 10 episodes, it becomes more important than ever that most of them be strong pieces of work. And while I personally only found 2 episodes of Series 11 to be what I would consider to be flat out bad, it had 5 that were little more than some form of just okay. Now, for comparison, I'm personally of the opinion that Series 8 also had 5 bland episodes, but in the case of Series 11, that same number of meh entries ends up being literally half the series. When you give us less, each failure carries more weight. This was going to be a highly scrutinized series, no matter what. But the fewer episodes only exacerbated the whole thing. I remember before the series started airing, seeing some people sort of referencing Marvel Netflix shows in regards to, the potential benefits of shaving off episodes. Because even the best of those shows were 2 to 5 episodes longer than they needed to be. And wouldn't those have been better with fewer episodes? Well, yeah, I've said as much myself, but the difference is that those Marvel Netflix shows were largely serialized stories. So the extra episodes just ended up being padded filler that delayed the overarching plot. Series 11 didn't do an overarching plot. So nothing gets inherently tightened from shortening it. I don't know if a more serialized story, something along the lines of Chibnall's own Broadchurch would have actually worked. Maybe not, but at least it would have been a choice that would make the loss of episodes more meaningful than it was. It would have added something instead of just taking things away. Also, I should be clear that my suspicion is that the episode count was the BBC's call rather than Chibnall's own personal preference. But knowing that if that call was made above his head, it would have happened, well ahead of the writing, and he just didn't take advantage of what that meant. He didn't do anything with it. One of the few things that was tangibly changed is that we've got more companions in the TARDIS than has ever happened before in New Who. And yet, I don't think that there's anyone who didn't feel this was a detriment to the series as a whole. It's the one common complaint that I hear that I absolutely share. If this many companions was ever going to work, it needed to happen in a series that was not also introducing us to a whole new Doctor. Even the times before where New Who did, 2 companions, like Rory and Amy, Bill and Nardole, it was with a Doctor we already knew. So, with 4 new characters, because introducing a new Doctor is pretty much like introducing a whole new character, there just isn't enough time to give them all something to do and a chance to bond with the audience or even each other, especially with fewer episodes to do it in. Rather than get to know the new Doctor and one companion really well, like has always been the case before in New Who, instead we got to know a new Doctor and 3 other people very superficially. I've mentioned before that Yaz is easily the most superfluous of the bunch. Not that she's actually a bad character or is poorly performed, but she's almost never given anything to do. Even the one episode that centers the most on her, which is Demons of the Punjab, is way more about her ancestors than it is about her, so she was really just the narrative device that got us there. Once the setup's done, she's just passively observing, just like the rest of us. Now, it's an admittedly great story that she gets to see unfold, but she doesn't do much. And even if the show chucked Yaz and kept the stronger pairing of Graham and Ryan, whose relationship has an actual arc, it still would have been a problem because the relationship we should be getting invested in is the one that the companions have with the Doctor. And I honestly couldn't tell you why any of these three are traveling with her. I can look back to earlier series and I can tell you not only why each of the previous companions chose to go with the Doctor, but I can also tell you why the Doctor wanted them to join. I honestly couldn't tell you why the Doctor gloms onto these three, aside from the fact that they just happened to be the first folks she ran into. And I don't know why the companions go with her after that first accidental adventure. Graham and Ryan, okay, a little, maybe because being away from home means they don't have to deal as head-on with Grace being dead, but that's not laid out properly or paid off properly either, and it still leaves Yaz as the also-ran regardless. Relatedly, it really does bother me that I didn't click with Jodie Whittaker's Doctor until the literal very end of the series. Now, I've pointed out before that this isn't the first time that it's taken me a while to get on board with a Doctor. I didn't really properly gel with Capaldi until his second series, and I still haven't had my aha moment with Davison. I'm starting to doubt I ever will. But in those cases, I can still point to just not connecting with the Doctor that I'm given, which sucks, but it happens. With the 13th Doctor, with Jodie Whittaker, the disconnect wasn't that I didn't connect with who the Doctor was. It was because I just flat out didn't know who this Doctor was at all. By the time the series ended, I felt like I finally had a proper sense of her, but if the show hadn't cut episodes while simultaneously bloating the cast, there would have been enough space for her to just flat out be present, enough for me to get what I was even being given. And once I understood, I actually quite liked it, but it shouldn't have taken that long. I'm of the opinion that the biggest overriding problem with Series 11 is that the stories rarely feel like they're in service of anything greater than themselves. Because even a standalone Doctor Who story should be bringing something to the table if they want it to be more than just fluff. There's nothing wrong with fluff, that can work, but you can't have a series of nothing but fluff. Something. Could be a new scenario for the Doctor, a strain on the Doctor-companion dynamic, a hint at some side of a character that we haven't seen before, etc., etc. Blink wasn't only a great standalone story, it gave us a whole new perspective on how these kinds of events look and feel for people who aren't the Doctor and the companion. And yes, I know technically Love and Monsters did it first, but Love and Monsters did it badly. Heaven Sent wasn't just a great standalone story. It perfectly encapsulated the Doctor's tenacity and the fake of insurmountable odds. It made that the true focus to a degree that hadn't happened before. Dalek isn't just a great standalone story. It shows a vicious streak that the Doctor had been trying to hide. Heck, an episode doesn't even have to be good to still contribute something. Tooth and Claw is a middling episode. I have a little affection for it, but it's not great. But through an observation by Queen Victoria, it plants the notion of the Doctor and Rose as being far too flippant and cavalier with the forces that they toy with, which is something that will pay off by the end of Series 2. Series 11 episodes don't feel like they're in aid of anything. They just happen. and then they're gone. They're popcorn. Even the good ones don't seem to have much lasting impact. I genuinely love It Takes You Away. Seriously. I think it's great. But all it really does for the characters is reestablish Graham's feelings of loss over, Grace without offering any new insight into them. If it was intended to just fuel his revenge goal in the next episode, it doesn't work because it doesn't build those emotions any more than any previous episode had done. All it does is remind us that this is a thing. There's an overall lack of ambition about just the entire enterprise. It doesn't feel like a bold new direction so much as an attempt to just meet expectations. I honestly feel like It Takes You Away was the only episode that legitimately swung for the fences. I do like some of the other episodes. Kerblam, Demons of the Punjab, as far as I'm concerned, they're top notch. But even those felt like they weren't trying to do more than just be good enough. For as bold as the surface level changes to the show were, the actual episodes are incredibly safe. Now, you may have noticed something that I haven't brought up yet, and that's the whole idea of politics somehow ruining the show, because I don't think they did. Politics or agendas are not the problem with these episodes. Well, okay, Arachnids in the UK was made all the worse by the horrendously on-the-nose character that poor Chris Noth had to play, but even that wasn't really ruined by the politics. Because if you remove that character, that awful, awful character, which is actually really easy to do because he isn't necessary to the story at all, the episode's still not any good. His presence doesn't help, but the episode stunk already. He didn't ruin it so much as just happened to also be there. And that's kind of my point. I can see a lot of problems with Series 11, but I don't see any of them being caused by the fact that the Doctor is now a woman or the companions are now more diverse. Series 11 has serious problems. And the Doctor is now a woman. But that's a correlation. That's not causation. Seeing people get hung up on those very visible changes reminded me of the lead up to the first season of Iron Fist. There was a conversation that happened within the fandom about whether or not the character of Danny Rand, aka the Iron Fist, should have been re-envisioned as Chinese or Chinese American. Now, back in the day, I did my own video on that idea, and I don't really want to revisit the actual debate, but just know that it was something that was in the conversation, before the thing premiered. But when the first season of Iron Fist came out, and it was awful, I actually said in my review, there's so much wrong with this show. I would really hate to think that if they had cast a Chinese American actor, that there would have been a certain stripe of fan who would have come in and said, see, this is what happens when you change the race of a character, when the problems with the show have nothing to do with that. And even if they had done that, wouldn't have been the problem either. So at this point, I'm glad they didn't, given how much the thing sucks. And I'm glad people don't have that to scapegoat. And that's basically how I see Series 11 when it comes to these arguments. The show did so little where the gender actually affected the narrative. Honestly, you could make the 13th Doctor a man, only have to switch a few lines of dialogue, and basically leave everything else the same. The gender didn't substantively impact the show. And keeping the Doctor a man still would leave all the exact same problems I'm talking about. Even The Witchfinders, the episode that in theory should have been most impacted by the gender change, wouldn't have to be altered much to still work with the Doctor as a man. Men got tried for witchcraft too, and the show didn't actually do much to play into her gender under the circumstances of that story. The true problems of Series 11 are too fundamental to have been worsened, caused, or even affected affected by what has so far proven to be a pretty superficial change to the Doctor. I have absolutely no doubt that somewhere along the line somebody is going to, or possibly already has, argue that the gender swap and the cast diversity, aka the SJW agenda stuff, simply being present at all was still somehow the cause of the bad writing. Maybe they'll say that the writers thought that they could put in less effort and just coast on progressive goodwill, which is unprovable if you weren't in the writer's room. So you might as well claim that the writing was bad because everybody got depressed from being served the same lunch every day. Maybe these theoretical commenters will say that there was too much effort put on these changes and not enough on the stories, except that the decision to do these casting changes didn't require any continual effort from Chibnall or the writers. It's just the initial casting. So how exactly does making a casting decision that gets announced well ahead of the writing cause there to be less effort put into the scripts? This theoretical commenter is probably also liable to point out that the writing staff was prioritized as being diverse, which is not theory. That's actually true. Chibnall himself did flatly say that diversity in the writer's room was a consideration when assembling the writing team. And this person might say that most of these writers had little background in sci-fi, which, okay, actually, there is at least a little meat on that bone. The writing staff may well have been in over their heads, and a lack of genre experience could have contributed to that. And if more of a priority was given to diversity rather than experience in the relevant genre, which isn't exactly what Chibnall said, but it wouldn't be a massive or altogether unfair presumption to assume that, then maybe there's something to this. The thing is, I actually feel that this argument falls apart when we look at the actual results, the episodes themselves, and who wrote what. Because the guy at the head of the whole thing, the middle-aged white guy who has been writing science fiction and Doctor Who specifically for years, doesn't have that excuse, and yet his scripts are consistently some of the weakest in the series. The best episodes of Series 11 were all written by people not named Chris Chibnall. So while this whole concern might have had some validity as a possible problem ahead of the release of the series, it just doesn't really square with what we've got. As to the diverse companions, I've already talked about the fact that too many of them is a problem. But that has nothing to do with diversity, that's just too many. But not only do I feel that the racial diversity among the three companions is not a cause of any additional problems, I feel like it's worth pointing out that two of the most praised episodes, those being Rosa and Demons of the Punjab, were really the only ones that actually built stories around the racial aspects. And despite my own complicated feelings about Rosa, it clearly connected with many people, and Demons of the Punjab is terrific. So the few times that the show actually did lean into one of the only new elements that was brought in, i.e. the race of the companions, the results were actually stronger and better received than the episodes where these characters could have been swapped out for white men with no story impact. Funny that. So ultimately, if I were to sum it all up, the problem here is a lack of purpose and ambition. Say what you will about Moffat. I've said plenty. Oh, fuck you, Moffat. But the man went big, which meant he succeeded big and he failed big. Davies, I would argue, was more even-keeled than Moffat, but his base level was still reliably fun and energetic entertainment with a bit of emotional drama. He still brought a pretty distinct flavor to the proceedings. Series 11 makes Chibnall feel like, makes him feel like a company man. Don't rock the boat, meet expectations, don't overshoot, keep it simple. Because for as much as people made a huge deal about the casting, there's nothing bold or different or even particularly self-assured about Series 11 outside of that casting. It feels very much like a show that's just trying to get by and is afraid to be big or bold. It feels like middle-of-the-road entertainment that doesn't want to be much more than that. And this is the last thing Doctor Who should be doing. Now, I've said before that I don't think this means Chibnall should actually be booted from his showrunner position. And despite everything I just said in this video, I actually still stand by that because I want to see how he'll change when tackling his next series. What lessons will he learn? What new ideas will he bring on board? How will he evolve? If, when we finally get Series 12, the answer ends up being, well, he didn't evolve at all, and we get something eerily similar to Series 11, that is when I'm going to get genuinely worried and might even start hoping for a behind-the-scenes, change in management kind of deal. Because I believe Doctor Who is strong enough to survive a rough series. I mean, it's done it before. Heck, with my own opinions on which series aren't that great, the fact that it includes Series 7 and 8, it's arguably recovered from 2 lousy series in a row, but even there were notable changes from one series to the other, even outside the regeneration and the new Doctor. When it came to Series 8, Moffat didn't just kick back and do the same thing he did in Series 7. It still didn't quite work, in my opinion, but at least it didn't just repeat the same mistakes. It made new mistakes, which at least shows effort. It shows growth, or at the very least attempts at it. And that is what I need to see from Chibnall and his writing team. Evidence of effort. I'll note that as of time of recording, we don't know who the other writers on Series 12 are going to be, besides Ed Heim, who wrote It Takes You Away, and is therefore, in my estimation, a good person to keep on. Because as I said, that felt like the only truly ambitious episode. But whether the other writers are new or diverse, or are veterans of earlier series, I just need to see more effort on display from the scripting side of things, because I feel like the cast and the directors, because I haven't mentioned this, but the show looked dang good, it should be said. I feel like the cast and the directors are trying to pull the weight of a frustratingly high percentage of limp scripts, and they can't be the only ones trying. And if Series 12 isn't much better than Series 11, I just hope that whatever changes might happen because of that are all behind the scenes and they aren't laid at the feet of the diverse cast who was trying to do their best with frequently mediocre material. If you want to blame anybody, you know what? The writers are the ones that probably deserve most of the blame for the problems with Series 11. Pretty much all the problems are writing problems. I get that maybe not everybody clicked with these companions or clicked with this Doctor, but I don't think there is inherently something wrong with the performances. Doesn't mean you have to like them, but I don't think that those are the problem. The writing's the problem. And it's not the writing of the diverse writing team that's the problem. It's Chibnall that's the problem right now. He didn't have a plan. I mean, we heard this thing that he had a 5-year plan. There's no evidence of a plan behind Series 11. It just kind of happens. So if his 5-year plan was to just be inoffensive, that's not good enough. And it wouldn't be good enough for Jodie Whittaker's Doctor. It wouldn't have been good enough for Capaldi, Smith, Tennant, Eccleston, or any of the classic Doctors. When all you aim for is to be good enough, it is not good enough. So, step it up, Chris. Please. Those are my thoughts on what the problems with Series 11 actually were, as well as some of what they very much were not. Those are my thoughts on it. I am going to have a lot of fun moderating the comment section on this one, aren't I? Well, we'll see. whatever your thoughts are on what I've said, keep them respectful. You can disagree with me without being a jerk about it, and you can also disagree with other commenters without being a jerk. That's the only rule. Don't be a jerk. If you can abide by it, drop whatever you think down in the comments, and let's talk about it. A whole bunch of stuff to do. Buttons, links, Patreon. I've got my Amazon wish list down there because it's my birthday this month. Also P.O. Box if you want to send me something that's not just off the wish list. So check that stuff out. Hey, it'd be thoughtful, it'd be nice, but also you don't have to. Because at the end of the day, you're the council and I'm just running the meetings. So until next time, this council is adjourned.